John. I'm a physician here at Emory, and I'll be speaking about this work from the context of a clinician and as a clinical trialist. So going back to the last presentation on with what Chica shared, this little vignette about cannabis, it's not the topic for this presentation, I think will really orient us about the way clinicians think about plant medicines and fungi and the intersection between the plant world and the synthetic world with which I work. So a couple of years ago, I had a patient who was in her 20s, who had leukemia, had a bone marrow transplant, and was referred to me because they thought she was going to die. And she had Aspergillus pneumonia because she smoked weed. And at the time on all of our medical exams, we know that spores on cannabis for people who are immunocompromised can lead to invasive pneumonias. This happened in real life. And she was using cannabis products to help with the pain and with the symptoms and with the nausea. So we really wanted to support this because it helped keep her off opioids, in my opinion. Not that opioids are universally bad, but for a 20-something who already had a cannabis use disorder prior to her diagnosis, who was then using cannabis to mitigate the symptoms of the disease and the treatments we were giving her, we couldn't allow her, we strongly recommended her to not use cannabis anymore and instead try to give her a synthetic cannabis called dronabinol, which is synthetic THC. That being said, the bioavailability of smoked cannabis is very different than ingested cannabis. The onset of action is very different. The immediate effect and kind of, for some euphoric effects, is different for ingested, and the duration of action is different. So as a clinician, for those of you thinking about becoming physicians and nurses, you know, if you meet someone who's smoking cannabis and you want to translate that into an oral regimen, it can be really challenging, but this is the landscape in which I work now. And this leads me to talking about our clinical trial at Emory. So as a palliative doctor, I take care of people with serious illnesses, some of whom are dying and are on hospice, and some of whom are sick for prolonged periods of time, oftentimes with physical, emotional, social, and spiritual problems that perhaps their primary care physicians or other specialists feel like someone else can handle better, or they would benefit from a multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary team. So I work with social workers, chaplains, community health workers, nurses, and other physicians and psychologists to support people on their serious illness trajectory and journey. Many of the patients I care for are not dying, and they are hooked on opioids because we've been blasting them with opioids to get through whatever they were going through. Also benzodiazepines. We did a survey of our patients, 2/3 of them who are not dying, who have medical illnesses like cancer, HIV, lung diseases, cystic fibrosis, etc., are hopeless, demoralized, they're in despair. 75% meet criteria for clinical depression. 3/4 are lonely. So there's just a lot happening to people. And this is Wesley. Wesley is the first patient in our clinical trial, and I can tell you his name and talk to you about his story because PBS filmed it. So everything that I'm sharing with you about him is in this documentary, and things that I can't share were not in the documentary about him. Wesley is in his late 20s. He was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma. He thought he was going to die. He had multiple surgeries. In this episode, he takes his shirt off. He's covered in scars, was on opioids for years, now smokes cannabis every day as a way to avoid opioids. His psychiatrist wants him off of the cannabis, although I think it's good for him. And we don't have to go into that. But while he was getting chemo, his girlfriend cheated on him and broke up with him. He became suicidal. He became homeless. He's been couch surfing for 2 years. He's aching for a religious or spiritual experience. He's thinking about going to seminary, but he's not really quite sure yet. His father died a week before he began the trial. And a few weeks after he finished the trial, his sister died and his cat died. His cat's featured in the episode. So life can be profoundly shitty for all of us and profoundly shitty for Wesley when he entered this trial. And we are giving him synthetic psilocybin, 25 milligrams. So let's, depending on who you ask, and the ratios of psilocybin and alkaloids in whatever mushroom you're consuming, that's between like 3 to 5 grams. It's a big spectrum. But this is what some people may call the heroic dose that we're giving these patients. And in our trial, which is, I would say, unique compared to other trials, we are using the strengths, the transdisciplinary strengths of an entire palliative care team to support people through this. So in this 3 to 4 minute clip, you're going to see 2 people. That's Shannon, she's a licensed therapist, and that's George. On this side, George is a chaplain. So we are using chaplains in the room for every single one of our patients or participants in this trial. A chaplain, in the modern sense, is a spiritual health clinician, agnostic to their clients or patients' own religious or spiritual identity. My favorite chaplain at Emory is an atheist, and she is loved by many of our patients who are devout with their Abrahamic religions. Wesley's also supported by a palliative care physician and a social worker. He's getting therapy from both right now. So this is a real transdisciplinary model which embeds all aspects of palliative care into the treatment of Wesley's care. And how do I start the video? Oh, there it is. I hope I'm going to screw this up. I screwed it up. So this is Wesley's dosing day.
Well, see him bright and early tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds great. Today's medicine day. Everyone's anticipating good things. And Shannon and I are going to be there for Wesley and see goes through his journey. It's a good thing.
Medicine day is 8 hours long, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The experience from the psilocybin will last 4 to 6 hours.
A little anxious, but overall good.
Dr. Dunlop administers 25 milligrams of synthetic psilocybin, which ensures precise dosing.
You have any last questions before we begin? Okay, so I'm going to give you the medicine. It's just one pill, okay? And I want you to drink it with plenty of water, okay?
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Well, all right, so thanks.
Within the first hour, Wesley notices sensations.
Sure, a little tingling. Feels good though. Feels really good.
He says he feels a shift in his body.
Felt really hollow for a really long time. It's just nice to like inhabit my own body again. So it's weird, like being all the way in my body again. Feels really nice not to be so rigid for once.
He seems to soften toward himself.
I guess there's a spark of the mind in me. I already got the light I need. That's cool to say out loud. Yeah, you know, seeing that like goodness in myself for once. Maybe the first time. I think I've always felt it, but I've never been able to like get this close to it. Really peaceful. Well, scary how relaxing this is.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
In the second hour, his experience intensifies.
Oh, shaky now. Like internally shaky. It doesn't look uncomfortable. Yeah, we're gonna want to hold my hands. Well, that might be nice. Maybe both of you, but it's gonna be pretty cool.
He grieves his cancer diagnosis.
I really give him so much space to grieve that 27-year-old version of me.
And the loss of his father.
Your son. We really good work together. That's all.
And then he says this about the cancer he has feared will return.
The cancer's gone, it's not coming back.
George takes Wesley's vitals every hour, his blood pressure and heart rate.
You're really like intense phase of the adventure right now. Oh boy. Well, scary, I know why. Yeah, I really appreciate y'all here. Oh man, it's thrills.
Wesley shows George and Shannon this far from his final resection to remove the cancer.
Yeah.
Wesley lies down and closes his eyes, and for the next hour he is quiet. He looks peaceful. At times there is a smile on his face and quiet laugh. And then he is back.
So it's nice to be back on Earth for a few minutes. Not quite sure where I went. It was a lot of fun, but very nice to feel that connection again. Been a long damn time. It's nice to give myself permission to feel things again. Nice to be safe to feel things again.
Wesley holds George and Shannon's hands and lies down again, this time for not quite as long.
Feel a little better, so.
As his experience draws to a close, Wesley is reminded to go home, to get some sleep, and they will begin processing all of it tomorrow. This is the first of 3 integrative sessions Wesley will do with George and Shannon.
Ooh, it's an intense
To
episode.
integrate and process the psilocybin experience and to
For the rest of the episode, Wesley talks about spirits, other guides who he didn't. The word he chose was spirits, and how much time do we have? 7. So much time. And if you could pull up the PowerPoint, thanks. What's metaphysically challenging about this work and therapeutically challenging is we have 2 therapists in the room, and there's a person now in the room who says, I met a bunch of spirits. And in modern clinical work, we really haven't created systems to talk about the divine or a spirit world in this work. And this was way better than all the slides that I had, so that's why I did it this way. So something we have to figure out as a field, as a society, and as the clinical world has to figure out is how to talk about the phenomenology of these experiences in ways that honor the patient's own voice and metaphysics without necessarily imparting what our own beliefs are. And that's a huge challenge for this work. For example, Wesley will say, well, those were spirits. And then a therapist might say, is like, well, what if they were something else? Is that challenge? Is that asking the patient to think more broadly, or is that narrowing or discounting the phenomena that he experienced? So we're on patient 8 of 10 right now, and we're planning the next study. And for me, the big thing is, what do you do afterwards, right? Because our patients are walking out. One of our patients, I think this was in the episode, so I can say Wesley was just like, I really wanted a garden, right? Like, we need, like, thank you for bringing some freshly cut flowers, but like, can you guys have a garden for me to roll around in? He like really wanted to run outside and just start rolling in the grass and like under a tree, big, not a surprise. And like, maybe one day I'll have enough money to build a garden at Emory for this purpose. But like, people are saying, you gave me this awakening, you gave me you let me tap into the fountain of knowledge. And then like, I have to go back to work because to get more chemo, we live in this neoliberal society where like employment and insurance are connected. So he has to be a productive neoliberal body to produce enough money so he can get chemo and more treatment so he can live. So like he has to enter the real world, but how can we help people enter this 3D world afterwards? So we're creating a community advisory board made up primarily of our patients, including sexual and gender minorities, Baptist, African-American patients, and people who are historically underrepresented in these trials, community psychotherapists who are open to this work, all these other medical services at the top, and trying to find kind of like pathways or channels of light, that I'll call them, to support people through their potential awakenings. This is, I think, the biggest challenge of psychedelic therapy, way more than dose and way more than I think even the set and setting of those like preparation and integration sessions. We need a society and communities that are actually, that can be held accountable for supporting people. There's so much harm, the capacity for harm in this work, and we need to really think beyond an IRB or beyond Emory University's ethics board of how to support people in the real world who've had spiritual awakenings. Last minute or two, these are really complex studies, so they involve drugs, right? So the drug variables, including the type of psychedelic we're using, the dose that we're using, how often we're giving it to people, and also whether it's sourced from a lab or sourced from the earth. I really want to study that one day. The psychotherapeutic model or container, the one I'm using is not evidence-based and kind of I made it up, but I think it's really important and we're going to study it using the chaplain and the palliative care team. The degree of support, whether you have like one person in the room or two people in a room, or how much time you devote to someone's own metaphysics is another variable. And finally, what I just mentioned, the societal container is critical. To study this stuff will take generations and generations and generations and generations, and culture will advance as we study this stuff. There's MDMA that's going to probably be FDA approved, but we could also study sassafras, which has MDA in it. And you know, we have spiritual communities in Atlanta that have dance parties on MDA, and like we should be studying these things as well. There's a lot to learn. That's why we need these transdisciplinary conferences. And this is our website. We have a Center for Psychedelics and Spirituality at Emory now. We're doing good work. And that's it. Thanks.